Hey there, and welcome to Crazy Pepper, the channel where drama sizzles and revenge burns hotter than ever. If you love jaw dropping twists, bold characters, and stories that keep you guessing till the end, you're in the right place. Subscribe and dive into gripping tales of betrayal, karma, and ultimate payback. Get ready for unforgettable moments and satisfying endings, only on Crazy Pepper. Hit that bell and let the drama begin. At my wife's 40th birthday party, her lover walked in with flowers. She kissed him in front of everyone. "Finally, a real man," she announced. I stood up and handed him an envelope. "Congratulations, she's all yours." He opened it, read it, dropped the flowers, and ran. But let me back up. My name is Daniel Vance, and until 3 months ago, I thought I was living a normal life in Millfield, Ohio. I'm a forensic accountant for the State Insurance Commission, the guy who catches people trying to defraud the system. Ironic, considering what I was about to discover about my own life. Eleanor and I had been married 12 years. She worked in public relations for Millfield General Hospital, organizing charity galas and managing their social media presence. To everyone else, we looked like the perfect middle-class couple. Two-story colonial house, matching SUVs, annual vacations to Florida. The cracks started showing when Eleanor's brother Jake moved back to town. Jake Brennan was in everything I wasn't. 6'3", broad shoulders, the kind of guy who dominated every room he entered. He'd been living in California, allegedly working in tech consulting, though he never seemed to have much money. When he showed up at our door with a single duffel bag and a sob story about a failed startup, Eleanor immediately offered him our guest room. "It's just temporary," she assured me that first night, her hand on my shoulder as Jake sprawled across our couch, beer in hand, remote control claimed like territory. "He just needs to get back on his feet." That was 6 months ago. Jake had opinions about everything, my job, my car, the way I loaded the dishwasher, but mostly he had opinions about Eleanor. "She's wasting her potential with that hospital gig," he'd tell me over dinner as if I wasn't sitting right there. "Eleanor's got real talent. She could be running her own PR firm, making serious money. Instead, she's playing secretary to a bunch of doctors." Eleanor would beam at these pronouncements like Jake was delivering profound wisdom instead of obvious observations. She started staying late at the hospital more often, attending networking events and professional development seminars. She bought new clothes, expensive ones. Started going to a different gym. The first real warning sign came when our friends Mike and Jennifer Chen invited us to their anniversary party. Eleanor spent the entire evening on her phone, texting someone. When Jennifer asked who was so important, Eleanor laughed it off. "Just work stuff, you know how it is." But I had seen the contact name before she could hide it. Marcus. I didn't say anything that night. I should have. 2 weeks later, Eleanor announced she was joining a cancer support group at the hospital. "Cancer support group?" I set down my coffee mug, studying her face. "Eleanor, is there something you need to tell me?" She waved her hand dismissively. No, it's for work. The hospital wants someone from PR to attend, to better understand the patient experience, make our outreach more authentic." It made sense. Eleanor was always taking on extra projects, always trying to prove herself. But something in her tone felt off. Too casual, too rehearsed. The support group meetings were every Tuesday and Thursday evening. Eleanor would come home from these sessions emotionally drained, sometimes crying. When I tried to comfort her, she'd push me away. "You wouldn't understand," she'd say. "These people are facing real problems, life and end stuff. It puts everything in perspective." Jake, naturally, had thoughts about this too. "She's too sensitive for that kind of work," he declared one evening while Eleanor was at another meeting. "All that sadness and fear. It's not healthy for someone like her. She needs to be around positive energy, successful people." "She's helping people," I said. "It's important work." Jake laughed, not a pleasant sound. "Danny boy, you've got to stop thinking so small. Eleanor's got ambition. She's not going to be satisfied playing house with a government paper pusher forever." The way he said paper pusher made my jaw clench. I'd heard that tone before, in my previous life. The dismissive arrogance of someone who'd never done real work, never taken real responsibility for anything. Because here's what Jake didn't know about me. Daniel Vance, the forensic accountant, was a carefully constructed identity. My real background was with a classified intelligence unit called the Auditors. We investigated financial crimes that crossed into national security, money laundering for terrorist organizations, foreign interference in American markets, corporate espionage with international implications. I'd left that world 12 years ago when I married Eleanor, trading adrenaline and danger for stability and normalcy. The auditors had given me a clean background, a legitimate job history, and a promise that my past would stay buried as long as I stayed retired. But old habits die hard. When someone starts setting off my instincts, I pay attention. And Jake Brennan was definitely setting off my instincts. I started with basic research, the kind of thing any concerned brother-in-law might do. Jake's social media presence was oddly sparse for someone his age. His LinkedIn showed a series of short-term consulting gigs with companies I couldn't verify. His credit report, which I accessed through legitimate channels at work, showed unusual patterns, large cash deposits followed by immediate transfers to offshore accounts. Then I dug deeper. Jake's real name was Jacob Marcus Brennan, but he'd been using variations of his middle name for the past 5 years. Marcus Brennan, Mark Brennan, Marcus Cole. Marcus Cole had been married 3 times in the past 8 years. All 3 wives had died within 2 years of marriage. All 3 had been wealthy. All 3 had died of what appeared to be natural causes: cancer, heart failure, complications from diabetes. All 3 had left everything to their grieving husband. The pattern was sophisticated, patient, and absolutely terrifying. Marcus would target women who were already dealing with health issues, gain their trust, marry them quickly, and then help their conditions worsen. Nothing that would show up in a standard autopsy. Nothing that would raise immediate suspicion. But I wasn't conducting a standard investigation. The Tuesday before Eleanor's birthday party, I followed her to her support group meeting. Instead of going to the hospital's cancer center, she drove to a small office building downtown. Through the window, I watched her embrace a man I recognized from the photos in my research file. Marcus Cole. My wife's brother, my wife's lover, my wife's potential butcher. They weren't attending a support group meeting, they were planning. I spent the next week gathering evidence. Financial records showing Eleanor had recently updated her will and life insurance beneficiaries. Medical records indicating she'd been receiving treatments for a condition that didn't exist. And most damning of all, security footage from the office building showing Marcus meeting with 6 other women over the past year. 3 of those women were now dead. So when Marcus walked into Eleanor's birthday party with those roses, when she kissed him and announced he was finally a real man, I was ready. The envelope I handed him contained copies of everything: the death certificates of his previous wives, the financial records, the medical fraud documentation, and a single photograph of him leaving the apartment of his most recent sufferer just hours before she died. But the real kicker was the letter on top, written in my careful handwriting. Marcus, the auditors never forget. You have 24 hours to disappear before this goes to the FBI. Your choice, DV. He read it. His face went white. He dropped the flowers and ran. The party went silent. Eleanor stared at me, confusion and fury warring on her face. Daniel, what the hell? Ladies and gentlemen, I announced to our stunned guests, I'd like to propose a toast to my wife Eleanor, who's about to learn the difference between a real man and a real monster. The aftermath of the birthday party was swift and brutal. Eleanor screamed at me for 2 hours straight, demanding explanations I couldn't give without revealing sources and methods that would expose my real background. Our friends, Mike and Jennifer Chen, Bob and Susan Martinez, Tom and Lisa Webb, all left that night convinced I'd suffered some kind of mental breakdown. By morning, Eleanor had packed a bag and moved in with her friend Roxanne Pierce, a local social media influencer who lived for drama. Roxanne immediately began documenting Eleanor's escape from an abusive marriage across all her platforms, painting me as a controlling husband who'd finally snapped. The story spread through Millfield like wildfire. Small towns love a scandal, and this one had everything: a public humiliation, a mysterious brother who'd vanished overnight, and a respected professional apparently losing his mind. My phone buzzed constantly with calls I didn't answer. My supervisor at the insurance commission, Patricia Wells, left 3 increasingly concerned voicemails requesting a meeting. My neighbors avoided eye contact when I checked the mail. But I wasn't concerned about social embarrassment. I was concerned about staying alive. Because Marcus Cole hadn't just disappeared, he'd gone underground. And in my experience, when a professional butcher goes underground, he's not running away. He's repositioning. I spent the next 3 days conducting surveillance from my home office, monitoring Eleanor's movements through a combination of social media tracking and old-fashioned observation. She was staying at Roxanne's downtown apartment, still going to work at the hospital, still maintaining the pretense that she'd been the sufferer of my sudden, inexplicable paranoia. What she didn't know was that I'd installed monitoring software on her phone 6 months ago, when I first suspected the affair. Every text message, every call, every GPS location, I had access to all of it. The messages between Eleanor and Marcus had stopped completely after the party. But there were new conversations, with someone identified only as H in her contacts. H, the situation has become complicated. We need to accelerate the timeline. Eleanor, I don't understand. You said Marcus would handle everything. Honey, Marcus is no longer available. There are other assets in play. Eleanor, assets? What are you talking about? I just wanted out of my marriage. H, Mrs. Vance, you entered into an arrangement. That arrangement has obligations. The conversation continued for several exchanges, revealing the horrifying truth. Eleanor hadn't just been having an affair. She'd been recruited into something much larger and more dangerous. The cancer support group was a front. Marcus Cole wasn't just a serial butcher. He was part of an organized network that identified and exploited vulnerable women, using romance and false medical diagnoses to manipulate them into financial arrangements that ultimately led to their ends. Eleanor had been a target, not a co-conspirator, at least not initially. But somewhere along the way, she'd been offered a choice: become a sufferer or become a partner. Help them target other women, and she'd get to keep the money and start a new life. She'd chosen partnership. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. The woman I'd married, the woman I'd loved for 12 years, had agreed to help homicide other wives in exchange for her freedom and a cut of the profits. I sat in my darkened office, staring at the messages, trying to reconcile this information with the Eleanor I thought I knew. The Eleanor who cried at animal rescue commercials. The Eleanor who volunteered at the food bank every Christmas. The Eleanor who'd held my hand through my father's funeral and promised we'd face everything together. But people change. Or maybe they just reveal who they really were all along. My phone rang. Patricia Wells, my supervisor. Daniel, we need to talk. My office, tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Patricia, I can explain. No explanations over the phone. Just be there. She hung up. I knew what that meant. Someone had filed a complaint about my behavior at the party. Probably multiple someones. In a small town like Millfield, a forensic accountant's reputation was everything. If people thought I was unstable, unreliable, prone to public outbursts, I'd lose my job. And without my job, I'd lose my access to the financial databases and investigation tools I needed to track down the rest of this network. But there was a bigger problem. The mysterious H who was coordinating with Eleanor. I had a growing suspicion about their identity. The communication patterns, the careful language, the reference to assets, it all felt familiar. I pulled up my encrypted files from my auditor's days, searching through old case reports and personnel files. The auditors had been disbanded 5 years ago following a scandal involving unauthorized domestic surveillance, but the personnel had been scattered to various other agencies. Some had gone to the CIA, some to the FBI, some to private sector security firms, and some had gone rogue. Harrison Webb had been my handler during my last 2 years with the auditors. A brilliant strategist with a talent for psychological manipulation and a complete absence of moral boundaries. He'd been forced out of the agency 6 months before I retired, officially for inappropriate conduct with assets, though the real reasons were classified above my clearance level. If Harrison was running a criminal network using intelligence community methods and resources, it would explain the sophisticated nature of Marcus Cole's operation. It would also explain how they'd found Eleanor, and how they'd known exactly which psychological pressure points to target. But it raised an even more terrifying question. Had they targeted Eleanor because of me? I spent the rest of the night going through old files, looking for connections between Harrison Webb and any of Marcus Cole's previous sufferers. What I found made my blood run cold. Sarah Martinez, Marcus's first wife, had been married to a former NSA analyst before her divorce. Jennifer Walsh, the second wife, had been engaged to a CIA contractor who died in Afghanistan. Rebecca Stone, the third wife, had been the daughter of a retired FBI counterintelligence agent. They weren't just targeting wealthy women. They were targeting women connected to intelligence professionals. Women who might have access to classified information, government databases, or professional networks that could be exploited. Eleanor fit the pattern perfectly. Married to a former auditor, working at a hospital with access to medical records and patient information, connected to the local business community through her PR work. They hadn't found Eleanor by accident. They'd been hunting me. The next morning, I drove to the Insurance Commission building in downtown Millfield, a converted bank building that still retained its original marble floors and brass fixtures. Patricia Wells's office was on the third floor overlooking Main Street. Patricia was in her 50s, a career bureaucrat with steel gray hair and the kind of sharp intelligence that made her excellent at her job. She'd hired me 12 years ago based on my manufactured credentials and had never had reason to question my background until now. "Sit down, Daniel." Her voice was carefully neutral. "We have a problem." I sat in the chair across from her desk, maintaining eye contact. "What kind of problem?" "The kind where 3 different people have called this office in the past 2 days, expressing concern about your mental health and professional judgment." She opened a file folder. "Bob Martinez says you publicly humiliated your wife at her birthday party. Jennifer Chen says you've been acting paranoid and erratic for months. Tom Webb says you physically threatened a house guest and made wild accusations about criminal activity." Tom Webb, Harrison's younger brother. I'd forgotten the connection until she said his name. "Patricia, there are things happening that I can't fully explain, but can't explain or won't explain." She leaned forward. "Daniel, you've been with this office for 12 years. You've never had a performance issue, never had a complaint filed against you, never given me any reason to question your judgment. But now suddenly you're having very public confrontations and making accusations about people being criminals with no evidence to support those claims." "There is evidence, if you'll let me show you." "What evidence?" "Because according to Tom Webb, you accused his brother-in-law of being a serial butcher based on nothing more than your own suspicions and internet research." I realized I was trapped. Any evidence I presented would raise questions about how I'd obtained it, which would lead to questions about my real background and capabilities. And if Tom Webb was reporting back to his brother Harrison, then Harrison already knew I was investigating the network. "Patricia, I need you to trust me on this. There are people in danger and—" "No." She closed the file folder. "What I need is for you to take a leave of absence. Get some help. Talk to someone. Figure out what's going on in your personal life and get it sorted out." "A leave of absence?" "Paid leave. 4 weeks. See a counselor, work things out with your wife, and come back ready to do your job professionally." She softened slightly. "Daniel, I'm trying to help you here. There are people calling for your termination. This is the best I can do." I knew arguing would only make things worse. "I understand, thank you." "Good. Clean out your desk today. I'll expect to hear from you in 4 weeks with documentation that you've addressed these issues." I walked back to my office in a daze. 4 weeks of paid leave meant 4 weeks without access to government databases, financial records, and investigation resources. 4 weeks while Eleanor remained connected to a network of butchers who now knew I was onto them. As I packed my personal items into a cardboard box, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Mr. Vance, we need to talk. Millfield Park, East Pavilion, 2 p.m. today. Come alone, H." Harrison Webb wanted a meeting. Millfield Park sat on 30 acres of rolling hills overlooking the Tuscarawas River, a remnant of the city's more prosperous past when steel mills and manufacturing plants provided good jobs for working families. Now it was mostly used by joggers, dog walkers, and teenagers looking for secluded places to drink beer. The East Pavilion was a stone structure built in the 1920s, with carved pillars and a red tile roof that had seen better decades. At 2 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon, it was deserted except for a man in an expensive gray suit sitting on one of the stone benches. Harrison Webb looked exactly like I remembered him. Tall, lean, silver hair, perfectly styled, the kind of man who commanded respect in boardrooms and government offices. He could have been a senator or a corporate CEO. Instead, he was apparently running a network that eliminated women for profit. "Daniel." He stood as I approached, extending his hand as if we were old colleagues meeting for lunch. "You look well. Marriage agrees with you." I ignored the handshake. "What do you want, Harrison?" "Straight to business. I always admired that about you." He gestured to the bench. "Please, sit. We have a lot to discuss." "I'll stand. Suit yourself." He sat back down, crossing his legs casually. I have to say, I'm impressed by your investigative work. Marcus Cole's background, the financial patterns, the connection between the sufferers. Very thorough. Very professional. Professional enough to put you in prison. Harrison laughed, a genuine sound of amusement. Oh, Daniel. You always were naive about how the world actually works. Do you really think I'd be here, talking to you like this, if I was worried about prison? Then why are you here? Because you've created a problem that needs to be solved. And because despite everything, I have a certain fondness for you. We worked well together in the old days. We worked together catching criminals, not becoming them. Did we? Harrison's expression grew serious. Do you remember the Kozlov operation? The Iranian banker we turned? The Pakistani arms dealer who had that unfortunate accident in Dubai? I remembered. Operations that had existed in the gray areas between legal and illegal, justified by national security concerns, and classified under authorities that no civilian court would ever see. That was different. Was it? We identified targets. We manipulated their personal relationships. We eliminated threats to American interests. The only difference now is that I'm working for myself instead of an ungrateful government that discarded us the moment we became politically inconvenient. The difference is that you're eliminating innocent women. Harrison's face hardened. Innocent? Sarah Martinez was embezzling from her husband's defense contracts. Jennifer Walsh was selling classified information to foreign buyers. Rebecca Stone was running a child exploitation network through her charity foundation. These weren't innocent women, Daniel. They were criminals who happened to be married to men with access to sensitive information. And Eleanor is... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Eleanor is complicated. She's my wife. She's a woman who came to us asking for help eliminating an inconvenient husband so she could start a new life with a substantial insurance payout. Harrison stood, walking to the edge of the pavilion. She approached Marcus at the hospital, Daniel, not the other way around. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. You're lying. Am I? Check her internet search history from 6 months ago. How to prove spouse is mentally unstable. Grounds for divorce in Ohio. Life insurance payout after spouse self-destruction. She was planning your end long before we ever made contact. I wanted to deny it, to dismiss it as psychological warfare, but the pieces fit too well with what I'd observed. Eleanor's behavior changes, the new clothes and gym membership, the way she'd pushed me away when I tried to comfort her about the support group meetings. Even if that's true, it doesn't justify what you're doing, doesn't it? Harrison turned back to face me. We provide a service, Daniel. We identify women who want their husbands dead, and we help them achieve that goal while simultaneously gathering intelligence on their husbands' professional activities. Everyone gets what they want. Except the husbands who end up dead. Husbands who, in most cases, are involved in activities that threaten national security. Your case is unusual because you've been genuinely retired. Most of our targets are still active in various capacities. So this is all about revenge? Getting back at the auditors? This is about survival. When the agency was disbanded, a lot of people lost their careers, their pensions, their futures. The government threw us away like used tissue paper. So we created our own organization, our own funding sources, our own mission parameters. Harrison walked closer, his voice dropping to the conversational tone he'd used during briefings in the old days. Here's what's going to happen, Daniel. You're going to stop investigating. You're going to reconcile with your wife. You're going to resume your normal life and forget this conversation ever happened. And if I don't, then Eleanor's cancer diagnosis becomes real and terminal. The threat was delivered in the same calm, professional tone Harrison had used to discuss eliminating foreign assets. No emotion, no anger, just a statement of operational parameters. You're going to eliminate her anyway. Not necessarily. Eleanor has been useful to us. She has access to hospital records, patient information, social connections throughout the community. She could continue to be useful for years as long as she remains cooperative and her husband doesn't interfere with our operations. What about Marcus? Marcus served his purpose. He's been relocated to a new area of operations. Harrison checked his watch. You have 24 hours to make your decision, Daniel. Reconcile with Eleanor or watch her die slowly and painfully while you're powerless to help her. He started to walk away, then paused. Oh, and Daniel, your friends the Chens, the Martinezes, the Webbs, They've been very helpful in documenting your recent erratic behavior. It would be unfortunate if something happened to them because of their association with you. After Harrison left, I sat in the pavilion for an hour, staring out at the river and trying to process what I'd learned. Eleanor had approached them first. She'd wanted me dead, not just divorced. The woman I'd loved and trusted for 12 years had been planning my homicide. But Harrison was also a professional liar and manipulator. How much of what he'd told me was true, and how much was designed to isolate me emotionally and psychologically? I needed more information, and I needed allies. My first stop was the Millfield Public Library, where I used their computers to access Eleanor's social media accounts using passwords I'd memorized from watching her type them. Her private messages painted a picture of a woman who'd felt trapped and resentful for years, complaining to friends about my boring job and predictable lifestyle. But there was something else. Medical records, uploaded to a secure cloud storage account I hadn't known existed. Lab results, diagnostic reports, treatment protocols, all documenting a case of ovarian cancer that had been diagnosed 3 months ago. Eleanor really was sick. The question was whether the illness was natural or induced. I drove to Millfield General Hospital, where Eleanor worked. The parking garage was mostly empty at 4 p.m. on a weekday, with most of the day shift having gone home and the evening shift not yet arrived. I found Eleanor's car on the 3rd level, a silver Honda Accord she'd bought 2 years ago. Using skills I hadn't practiced in over a decade, I picked the lock and searched the interior. In the glove compartment, I found a small plastic bottle with no label, containing white pills that looked like standard pain medication. But when I examined them more closely under the parking garage lights, I could see tiny pinprick holes in several of the capsules, evidence that they'd been opened and tampered with. Someone was poisoning Eleanor's medication. The realization changed everything. Harrison's network wasn't just manipulating Eleanor psychologically, they were making her physically sick, creating real symptoms that would support the fake cancer diagnosis. She probably didn't even know she was being poisoned. My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor's number. "Daniel, we need to talk. Can you meet me at home tonight, 8 p.m.? I stared at the message, trying to determine if Eleanor had sent it herself or if someone else was using her phone. The tone was different from her usual texting style, more formal, less emotional. But it didn't matter. I needed to see her to warn her about what was happening, to try to save what was left of our marriage, and possibly her life. I just had to figure out how to do it without getting both of us eliminated. I arrived at our house at 7:45 p.m., parking across the street and observing the property for 15 minutes before approaching. Eleanor's Honda was in the driveway, but there was also a black SUV with tinted windows parked 2 houses down that hadn't been there when I'd driven past that morning. The front door was unlocked, which immediately set off alarm bells. Eleanor was obsessive about home security, always checking locks twice and setting the alarm system even for short trips to the grocery store. "Eleanor," I called out as I entered the foyer. "In the kitchen," came her voice, but something about the tone was wrong. Too steady, too controlled. I found her sitting at our kitchen table, still wearing her work clothes, a navy blue dress and matching blazer that made her look professional and competent. But her face was pale, and there were dark circles under her eyes that hadn't been there a week ago. "You look terrible," I said, sitting across from her. "Thank you. That's exactly what every woman wants to hear." But there was no heat in her sarcasm, just exhaustion. "Eleanor, we need to talk about what's really happening here. Do we? Because from where I'm sitting, what's happening is that my husband of 12 years has lost his mind and is making wild accusations about people I care about." "People you care about?" I leaned forward. "Eleanor, Marcus Cole isn't who you think he is. He's a professional butcher who's eliminated at least 3 women in the past 5 years. That's insane. Is it? When's the last time you talked to him? When's the last time he answered his phone?" Eleanor's composure cracked slightly. He had to leave town suddenly. "Family emergency." "What family? What emergency?" "I don't know the details. It's not my business. It is your business when you're sleeping with him." The words hung in the air between us like a physical barrier. Eleanor's face flushed, but she didn't deny it. "How long?" I asked quietly. "Daniel, how long, Eleanor?" 6 months. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "It started 6 months ago. At the cancer support group that doesn't exist." She looked up sharply. "What do you mean, doesn't exist?" "I followed you, Eleanor. That office building downtown? There's no cancer support group there. It's a front for something else entirely. You followed me? Her voice rose with genuine anger. You've been spying on your own wife? I've been trying to save your life. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos I'd taken of the tampered medication. Someone is poisoning you, Eleanor. Those pain pills you've been taking? They've been injected with something that's making you sick. Eleanor stared at the photos, her face going even paler. That's not possible. Look at the evidence. The pinprick holes in the capsules, the fact that your symptoms started right around the time you met Marcus, the convenient cancer diagnosis that requires expensive treatments. Stop. Eleanor stood abruptly, pacing to the kitchen window. Just stop. You're scaring me. Good. You should be scared. Because the people you've gotten involved with don't just eliminate their targets, Eleanor. They eliminate anyone who becomes inconvenient. What people? What are you talking about? I made a decision that would either save our marriage or destroy what was left of it. Eleanor, my real name is Daniel Vance, but my background isn't what you think it is. I used to work for a classified intelligence unit called the Auditors. We investigated financial crimes with national security implications. Eleanor turned from the window, staring at me as if I'd grown a second head. Intelligence unit? Daniel, you're a forensic accountant. That's my cover identity. It's been my cover for 12 years, ever since I retired and married you. But the people who are manipulating you, they know who I really am. They're using you to get to me. Eleanor sat back down heavily. This is insane. You're talking like we're in some kind of spy movie. I wish we were. In movies, the good guys always win. I reached across the table, trying to take her hand, but she pulled away. Eleanor, I know this is hard to believe, but you have to trust me. Your life depends on it. My life depends on it? She laughed bitterly. Daniel, my life fell apart the moment you handed Marcus that envelope at my birthday party. I've lost my friends, my reputation, probably my job. People think I'm married to a lunatic. What people? Everyone. Bob Martinez called me yesterday, asking if I was safe at home. Jennifer Chen wants me to consider a restraining order. Tom Webb offered to help me find a divorce attorney. Tom Webb. Harrison's brother still feeding information back to the network. Eleanor, listen to me very carefully. Tom Webb is not your friend. His brother Harrison is the one running this operation. They've been planning this for months, maybe years. Planning what? My end, and eventually yours. Eleanor stood again, this time moving toward the kitchen door. I can't do this. I can't sit here and listen to these paranoid fantasies. Where are you going? Back to Roxanne's. At least there I don't have to worry about my husband accusing everyone I know of being part of some vast conspiracy. Eleanor, please, just give me one more day to prove what I'm telling you. She paused at the doorway, her back to me. One day to prove that everyone I've trusted for the past 6 months has been lying to me? One day to prove that my husband is actually a secret agent and my lover is a serial butcher? Yes. And if you can't prove it, then I'll sign whatever divorce papers you want, and I'll leave you alone. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. When she turned back to face me, tears were running down her cheeks. Daniel, I'm dying. The doctors say I have maybe 6 months if the treatment doesn't work. 6 months to figure out what I want to do with whatever time I have left. And instead of supporting me, instead of helping me through this, you're creating these elaborate fantasies about conspiracies and homicide plots. The pain in her voice was real, and it cut through my anger and suspicion like a knife. Whatever else was true, whatever lies she'd been told or choices she'd made, Eleanor was genuinely terrified and genuinely sick. Show me the medical records, I said quietly. What? The cancer diagnosis, the treatment plan, the doctor's reports. Show me the official medical records, and I'll believe you. Eleanor wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. They're confidential. You can show them to your husband. Can I? Because lately it feels like I don't have a husband. I have a stranger who looks like Daniel, but acts like someone I've never met. She was right, and I knew it. The investigation, the surveillance, the suspicion, it had changed me, brought back patterns of behavior from my old life that I'd tried to leave behind. Eleanor, I love you. Whatever's happened between us, whatever mistakes we've both made, I love you and I want to protect you. Then stop trying to protect me from imaginary threats and help me deal with the real ones. What if they're the same thing? Eleanor stared at me for a long moment, then walked back to the table and sat down. One day, she said finally, you have one day to convince me that I'm not married to a man who's lost his mind. But Daniel, if you can't prove these things you're saying, if this is all just paranoia and jealousy, Then we're done, completely done. Understood. And no more spying on me. No more following me or going through my things or hacking my accounts. If we're going to figure this out, we do it together. I nodded, though I had no intention of keeping that promise if it meant letting her walk into danger. Good. Eleanor stood again. I'm going back to Roxanne's tonight. Tomorrow morning, you can show me this evidence you think you have. But, Daniel, it better be more than just suspicious internet searches and conspiracy theories. After she left, I sat in our empty house and tried to figure out how to prove a conspiracy to someone who was already part of it, whether she knew it or not. I had 24 hours to gather evidence that would convince Eleanor she was in danger, while simultaneously avoiding the network of butchers who were watching both of us. But I also had advantages they didn't know about, skills they thought I'd forgotten, resources they didn't know I could access, and most importantly, a motivation they couldn't match. They were doing this for money and revenge. I was doing this for love. I spent the night at my home office using encrypted communication protocols I hadn't touched in over a decade to contact former colleagues who might still have active security clearances. By dawn, I had confirmation of what I'd suspected. Harrison Webb was running a sophisticated criminal enterprise that had been operating for at least 3 years, with connections to money laundering operations in 6 states and possible ties to foreign intelligence services. More importantly, I had documentation. At 8 a.m., I drove to Roxanne Pierce's downtown apartment, a converted loft space above what used to be a hardware store. Eleanor's Honda was parked outside, confirming she'd spent the night there, as promised. I knocked on the door, and Roxanne answered wearing yoga pants and an oversized t-shirt, her blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked like she'd been up late, probably documenting Eleanor's escape from an abusive marriage for her social media followers. Daniel. Her voice was cold, professional. Eleanor said you might be coming by. Is she here? She's getting dressed. Come in, but I'm warning you. If you start yelling or making accusations, I'm calling the police. The apartment was exactly what I'd expected from a social media influencer. Carefully arranged furniture, professional lighting equipment, and cameras positioned to capture the best angles for video content. Eleanor emerged from the bedroom wearing jeans and a sweater, looking more rested than she had the night before. You said you had evidence, she said without preamble. I set my laptop on Roxanne's coffee table and opened the files I'd compiled. This is Harrison Webb, former intelligence officer, currently running a criminal network that targets women married to men with government security clearances. The screen showed Harrison's official personnel photo from his auditor's days, along with classified documents detailing his dismissal from the agency. This is Marcus Cole, real name, Jacob Marcus Brennan, professional con artist and suspected serial butcher. I clicked to the next screen showing Marcus's arrest records, marriage certificates, and death certificates of his previous wives. Eleanor stared at the information, her face growing pale. Where did you get this? Sources I can't reveal without compromising ongoing investigations. It was a lie. I'd obtained most of the information through illegal database access, but it sounded official enough to be credible. Ongoing investigations? Roxanne leaned forward, suddenly interested. Are you saying Eleanor's been involved with criminals? I'm saying Eleanor's been targeted by criminals. I clicked to the next screen, showing financial records that traced money transfers between shell companies connected to Harrison's network. They identify women married to men with valuable professional access, then use romance and manufactured medical crises to manipulate them into cooperation. Manufactured medical crises? Eleanor's voice was barely above a whisper. I showed her the laboratory analysis I'd commissioned overnight, using contacts from my old life who could run tests without asking questions. The medication you've been taking has been contaminated with low-level toxins that mimic cancer symptoms. You're not dying, Eleanor. You're being slowly poisoned. Eleanor stared at the lab report, her hands shaking. This can't be real. It's real! The question is, what are we going to do about it? Roxanne had been unusually quiet during my presentation, but now she spoke up. This is all very dramatic, Daniel, but how do we know any of this is legitimate? You could have created these documents yourself. It was a reasonable question, and one I'd anticipated. Call the FBI field office in Cleveland. Ask to speak to Agent Sarah Martinez. Tell her you have information about Operation Black Widow. Operation Black Widow was the code name I'd invented for Harrison's network. But I was gambling that the FBI had been tracking similar patterns and would recognize the significance of the information. Eleanor looked up from the lab report. If this is true, if I've really been poisoned, then Marcus was never your lover. He was your executioner. The words hit her like a physical blow. Eleanor doubled over, clutching her stomach, and for a moment I thought she was going to be sick. Then she straightened up, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen in months. Clarity. What do you need me to do? I need you to help me expose the entire network. But Eleanor, once we start this, there's no going back. These people eliminate anyone who threatens their operation. They were going to eliminate me anyway, weren't they? Eventually, yes. Eleanor stood up, walking to the window that overlooked Main Street. How many other women are there? How many other wives are being targeted right now? Based on the financial patterns, probably a dozen active cases across 3 states. And if we don't stop them, they'll all die and their husbands will be blamed for their passings or disappearances. Eleanor turned back to face me. Then we stopped them. Roxanne had been recording our conversation on her phone, which was exactly what I'd hoped she would do. Roxanne, I need you to upload that video to every social media platform you have access to. Make it go viral. Why? Because the best protection we have right now is publicity. If this story spreads fast enough, it becomes too big for Harrison's network to contain through violence. Eleanor walked back to the coffee table and picked up my laptop. Show me everything, every document, every piece of evidence, every connection you found. For the next 2 hours, I walked Eleanor and Roxanne through the entire conspiracy. The financial networks, the sufferer profiles, the methods used to target and manipulate the women, and the ultimate goals of the operation. By the time I finished, Roxanne's video had been viewed over 50,000 times and was being shared across multiple platforms. My phone rang. Agent Sarah Martinez, FBI. Mr. Vance, I understand you have information about a criminal network targeting military and intelligence families. I do. How quickly can you get to Millfield, Ohio? I'm already en route. We've been tracking similar patterns for 18 months, but we haven't had anyone willing to come forward with direct evidence. Well, you do now. Mr. Vance, I need to warn you, if this network is as sophisticated as you're suggesting, coming forward puts you and your wife in immediate danger. We're already in danger. At least this way, we're fighting back. After I hung up, Eleanor sat down next to me on Roxanne's couch. Daniel, I need to tell you something. What? 6 months ago, when I first met Marcus, I was angry at you. Angry at our marriage, angry at my life, angry at feeling trapped and invisible. She took a deep breath. When he started paying attention to me, making me feel special and desired, I wanted to believe it was real, even when part of me knew it was too good to be true. Eleanor, let me finish. When they told me about the cancer, when they said I only had months to live, it felt like permission to do things I'd never done before. To take risks, to be selfish, to prioritize my own happiness for once. You weren't selfish. You were manipulated. I was both. And Daniel, there's something else you need to know. She pulled out her phone and showed me a text conversation I hadn't seen before. Marcus, your husband is more dangerous than you realize. He's not just a forensic accountant. Eleanor, what do you mean? Marcus, he used to work for a classified intelligence unit. He has skills and connections that make him a threat to people like us. Eleanor, people like us, Marcus. People who want to disappear and start over somewhere new. The conversation continued for several exchanges, revealing that Marcus had told Eleanor about my real background, weeks before I'd revealed it myself. He'd used that information to convince her that I was the real threat, that I would use my government connections to track her down and punish her if she tried to leave. He told me you'd never let me go, Eleanor said quietly, that you'd use your intelligence training to hunt me down no matter where I went. He said the only way I could ever be free was if you were gone. And you believed him? I was dying, Daniel, or at least I thought I was. When you're facing end, you'll consider options that would never occur to you otherwise. Eleanor's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mrs. Vance, you have 1 hour to cease all cooperation with law enforcement and retract your public statements. Failure to comply will result in immediate consequences for you and your associates. I showed the message to Roxanne, whose face went white. They're threatening us? They're desperate, which means we're winning. But even as I said it, I was calculating response times and defensive positions. The FBI was still at least an hour away, and Harrison's network had demonstrated they were willing to use violence when necessary. My phone rang. Harrison Webb. Daniel, you've made a serious mistake. Have I? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like I've exposed a criminal conspiracy and saved my wife's life. Your wife's life was never in danger until you involved law enforcement. Now, however, the situation has changed. Meaning you have 30 minutes to get Eleanor to a location I'm going to text you, or Roxanne Pierce is going to have a very unfortunate accident while live streaming to her 50,000 followers. The line went dead. A moment later, my phone buzzed with an address. The abandoned Millfield Steel Foundry on the outskirts of town. Eleanor had heard enough of the conversation to understand what was happening. He wants to trade me for Roxanne? He wants to eliminate all the witnesses and make it look like a homicide self-destruction. Jealous husband eliminates wife and her friend, then turns the tool on himself. So what do we do? I looked at Eleanor, then at Roxanne, then at the laptop full of evidence that could destroy Harrison's entire network. We end this. The Millfield Steel Foundry had been abandoned for 15 years, a rusting monument to the town's industrial past. The main building was a cathedral of twisted metal and broken windows, surrounded by smaller structures that had once housed administrative offices and worker facilities. I parked a quarter-mile away and approached on foot, using skills I hadn't practiced since my auditor's days to move silently through the overgrown industrial landscape. Eleanor had wanted to come with me, but I'd convinced her to stay with Roxanne at the police station, where they'd be safe until the FBI arrived. At least, that was the plan. My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. Daniel, they took Roxanne. We're both here. I'm sorry. I was walking into a trap, but I'd known that from the beginning. The question was whether I could spring a trap of my own. I found them in the main foundry building, in what used to be the central work area, where molten steel had been poured and shaped. Harrison Webb stood in the center of the space, wearing the same gray suit from our meeting at the park. Eleanor and Roxanne were seated in metal chairs about 20 feet away, their hands zip-tied behind their backs. Marcus Cole stood behind them, very much alive and holding a pistol with the casual competence of someone who'd used weapons professionally. Daniel. Harrison's voice echoed in the cavernous space. Thank you for coming. I was hoping we could resolve this situation without unnecessary violence. Let them go, Harrison. This is between you and me. Is it? Because from my perspective, this is about a criminal network that's been exposed to federal law enforcement, which creates problems for a lot of people. I walked closer, keeping my hands visible, and my movements slow and non-threatening. How many people, Harrison? How big is this thing really? Bigger than you imagine. The women we target, the intelligence we gather, the money we generate, it all feeds into something much larger than a simple homicide-for-hire scheme. Foreign intelligence? Harrison smiled. You always were perceptive. Yes, foreign intelligence. Specifically, a joint operation between Russian SVR and Chinese MSS to identify and exploit vulnerabilities in American intelligence networks. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about money or revenge. It was about espionage on a massive scale. The women are just cover, I said, understanding flooding through me. The real targets are their husbands. Exactly. We identify intelligence professionals who have access to sensitive information, then use their wives to gain access to their homes, their computers, their professional networks. Sometimes we extract information directly. Sometimes we simply eliminate threats to ongoing operations. And I was a threat. You were retired, Daniel, but you still had contacts, still had access to classified databases, still had the skills to uncover operations like ours. When we learned you were living quietly in Ohio, married to a woman with access to medical records and social networks, you became a priority target. Eleanor spoke up from her chair. You used me. We gave you what you wanted, Marcus said, his voice cold and professional. Freedom from a boring marriage, excitement, the attention of an attractive man who made you feel special. You poisoned me. We gave you a reason to feel special. The cancer diagnosis, the support group, the sense that you were facing something dramatic and meaningful, it was all designed to make you feel like the protagonist of your own story instead of a supporting character in someone else's. The psychological manipulation was sophisticated and cruel, designed to exploit Eleanor's deepest insecurities and desires. But it had also created an opportunity. Eleanor, I said quietly, do you still have your phone? She nodded slightly. Is Roxanne's live stream still active? Roxanne's eyes widened as she understood what I was asking. She nodded toward her phone, which was propped against a piece of machinery about 10 feet away, its camera pointed toward the center of the room. Harrison and Marcus had been so focused on controlling the physical situation that they hadn't noticed they were being broadcast live to thousands of viewers. Harrison, I said, raising my voice slightly, tell me about the Russian connection. How long have you been working for the SVR? Since 6 months after the auditors was disbanded, they approached me through intermediaries, offered me a chance to use my skills for people who actually appreciated them. And the Chinese? Joint operation. The Russians provide the strategic planning, the Chinese provide the funding and technical support. We provide the intelligence and elimination services. Every word was being recorded and broadcast. Even if Harrison eliminated all of us, the evidence would survive. How many American intelligence officers have you eliminated? Directly? Maybe a dozen over the past 3 years. Indirectly, through information we've provided to our foreign contacts? Probably 50 or 60. Marcus shifted nervously. Harrison, maybe we should... Should what? We're past the point of containment, Marcus. The only option now is elimination and extraction. Harrison pulled out his own weapon, a compact pistol that looked military issue. I'm sorry it's come to this, Daniel. I genuinely hoped we could find a way to work together. We could have, 12 years ago, when we were both working for the same country. Countries change, Daniel. Loyalties change. The America we serve doesn't exist anymore. Maybe not, but the people we swore to protect still do. I'd been slowly moving closer during our conversation, using the same techniques I'd learned for approaching hostile subjects in the field. Now I was within 10 feet of Harrison, close enough to make a move if the opportunity presented itself. The opportunity came when Eleanor suddenly screamed. It wasn't a scream of fear or pain. It was a deliberate distraction, timed perfectly to coincide with Marcus turning slightly to look at her. In that split second of divided attention, I launched myself at Harrison. We went down hard on the concrete floor, his pistol skittering away into the darkness. Harrison was older than me, but still in excellent physical condition, and he fought with the vicious efficiency of someone who'd eliminated before. But I was fighting for Eleanor's life, and that gave me an edge he couldn't match. The fight lasted maybe 30 seconds. When it was over, Harrison was unconscious, and I was standing over him with his pistol in my hand. Marcus had his weapon pointed at Eleanor's head. Drop it, Daniel. You drop it, Marcus. Or Jacob. Or whatever your real name is. I'll eliminate her. No, you won't. Because if you eliminate her, you lose your only leverage. And if you lose your leverage, I put a bullet in your head and walk away. Marcus's hand was shaking slightly. He was a manipulator and a poisoner, not a gunfighter. Direct confrontation wasn't his strength. Besides, I continued, you're being live streamed to about 20,000 people right now. You really want to commit homicide on camera? Marcus glanced toward Roxanne's phone, and in that moment of distraction, Eleanor threw herself sideways off the chair. The zip ties had been loose enough for her to work her hands free, and she'd been waiting for the right moment. Marcus's shot went wide, and mine didn't. He dropped to the ground, clutching his shoulder and screaming. Not a fatal wound, but enough to take him out of the fight permanently. I cut Eleanor and Roxanne free with a knife I found in Harrison's jacket, then called Agent Martinez to report our location. It's over, I told Eleanor as we waited for law enforcement to arrive. Is it? What about the rest of the network? What about the foreign intelligence connections? That's not our problem anymore. We did our part. Eleanor leaned against me, exhaustion and relief evident in every line of her body. Daniel, I'm sorry for everything. For not trusting you, for believing their lies, for you don't have anything to apologize for. They targeted you because of me, manipulated you because of my background. If anyone should apologize, it's me. We both made mistakes. Yeah, but we're both alive to learn from them. Roxanne had retrieved her phone and was documenting the aftermath for her followers, who were apparently going crazy in the comments section. This is going to be the most viral thing I've ever posted. Good, I said. The more people who see this, the harder it will be for anyone else to cover it up. Agent Martinez arrived 20 minutes later with a full tactical team, paramedics, and enough firepower to handle a small war. Harrison was taken into custody after being treated for a concussion. Marcus was transported to the hospital under guard. Over the next 6 hours, Eleanor and I gave detailed statements about everything we'd experienced and witnessed. The evidence we'd gathered, combined with the live-streamed confessions, provided the foundation for what would become the largest counterintelligence investigation in decades. 3 weeks later, I was back at work at the Insurance Commission, though my caseload had been adjusted to focus on international financial crimes. Patricia Wells had quietly arranged for me to receive a commendation for exceptional service to law enforcement, though the details remained classified. Eleanor had been cleared by her doctors, the poisoning had caused no permanent damage, and her recovery was complete. She'd also been offered a new position with the FBI's Sufferer Services Division, helping other people who'd been targeted by foreign intelligence operations. We were having dinner at home, something we'd done every night since the Foundry incident, when Eleanor asked the question I'd been expecting. What happens now? What do you mean? With us? With our marriage? We've been through something that most couples never experience, and I don't know how to process it all. I set down my fork and looked at her across the table. Eleanor, 6 months ago, you were planning to have me eliminated. 3 weeks ago, you saved my life. I think we're even. She laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd heard from her in months. That's a hell of a way to look at marriage counseling. We could try the traditional approach if you prefer. No, I think we've moved past traditional. Eleanor reached across the table and took my hand. Daniel, I love you. I've always loved you, even when I was angry and confused and making terrible decisions. But I need to know that you trust me, that you're not going to spend the rest of our marriage wondering if I'm going to betray you again. Eleanor, you didn't betray me. You were targeted by professionals who knew exactly which psychological buttons to push. The fact that you recognized the manipulation and fought back when it mattered most tells me everything I need to know about who you really are. And who am I? You're the woman who threw herself off a chair to give me a clear shot at a man who was pointing a tool at your head. You're the woman who chose to fight back instead of giving up. You're the woman I married 12 years ago, and you're the woman I want to spend the rest of my life with. Eleanor squeezed my hand. Even knowing that I'm not the quiet, predictable wife you thought you married, especially knowing that. My phone buzzed with a text from Agent Martinez. Final count, 847 arrests across 12 countries, network completely dismantled. Thank you. I showed the message to Eleanor, who read it and smiled. 847 people, she said. How many lives do you think we saved? Hundreds, probably. Maybe thousands. Not bad for a boring forensic accountant and a hospital PR coordinator. Former boring forensic accountant. I think my cover's blown. Eleanor stood up and walked around the table to sit in my lap. Good. I like the real Daniel Vance better anyway. She kissed me, and for the first time in months, it felt like coming home. Outside our kitchen window, Millfield looked exactly the same as it had 6 months ago. Quiet streets, modest houses, ordinary people living ordinary lives. But I knew now that ordinary was just another word for precious, and precious was worth fighting for. Harrison Webb and Marcus Cole were facing life sentences in federal prison. The foreign intelligence networks they'd served were in shambles. The women they'd targeted were safe, and the men they'd planned to eliminate were alive. Eleanor and I had our marriage back, stronger than it had ever been. Game over. And for once, we won.